Hello, and welcome to Fred on Film, or FOF for short. It is extremely hot in London today, and so I may sound more docile than usual. And that's because I'm trying not to move my limbs, like my actual muscles and tendons, as much as possible, so not to exert any energy, break a sweat, or anything. It is absolutely searingly hot in the capital, and anyone who's experienced London heat knows that it's different to like holiday heat, you know? Like on my honeymoon, it was 32 degrees, absolutely loving it, in similar outfits to what I'm wearing out and about in London. But when you're in London, it's like you're in Satan's fucking butthole, okay? So there is that. I am slightly more docile, and I'm going to try and get through today's 28 years later special themed episode with composure and calmness, which maybe some people might enjoy. Maybe that's an aesthetic you enjoy. Or can you have auditory aesthetics? Maybe not. Maybe one for another day. So yeah, I went to the 28. So today's episode is all going to be about 28 years later. Normally I might run through kind of a variety of news topics. We might do the FOFSCAs, which is awarding alternative awards to something that's relevant for that week. We did the Danny Boyle FOFSCAs a couple of weeks ago in anticipation of 28 years. But this week I'm going to keep it full 28 years because we've got a real chock-a-block release schedule coming up. So we have 28 years this week just gone. A lot of you listening to this will have already seen it. We've got F1 coming up the week coming as I speak and as you listen, hopefully. And then we've got Jurassic Rebirth the week after that. And then, to be honest, we're close, we're getting towards August. There's a few things coming out as well. So I'm going to just try and keep this 28 years. Next week can be F1. And if any big news stories come out in the meantime, we can talk about them as well. So follow me on Instagram and TikTok. It's at Fred Asquith on Film. It's also linked on my personal profile if you can't be asked to fucking type it. If you're watching on YouTube, go have a listen, Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening, go have a watch. All those links are in my link in bio on all platforms. I've made it that available and that clear how to find this podcast and the ancillary links to all the different ways to watch and listen and follow on the Instagrams and TikToks and whatever. That if you can't find how to do any of those things, maybe it's not for you, because it's actually extremely obvious. Okay. So, yes, thanks for the response, by the way. I'm seeing the numbers go up, more audience coming on board. I think people are getting what I'm trying to put out there, which is like a kind of an open door, an open conversation for an open chat for chatty film enthusiasts who aren't maybe quite as chin-strokey or as knowledgeable as other chats or podcasts about film. I think I know my stuff when it comes to film and TV, but I wouldn't say that I'm encyclopedic on like having seen every single facet of international cinema and all this. So I would say I'm a relatively mainstream, passionate film nerd. That's my balance, and I think that you guys are on board with that. Thank you very much. So, went to the 28 years later premiere. This was on Wednesday, just gone as I speak, and didn't know what to wear. Absolutely roasting. Put on some like chino trousers, a t-shirt and a jacket. Still roasting. Why is there not a formal dress that a guy can wear that is not including a jacket, which is a fucking overcoat, essentially? Way to make me heat up 30 degrees. I was actually spending the day with James of Pulp Kitchen fame. So there's a film podcast, a film podcast that I aspire to be the size of one day. They've just hit 100k followers on Instagram and TikTok as well, I think. James and George, Pulp Kitchen, great podcast, go listen. George is on holiday at the moment, and so James invited me to fill in for George on their Patreon episode. I really enjoyed that. We talked about different news stories, Jurassic Rebirth, the new Bruce Springsteen trailer, all this. So I spent the day with James, and then James happened to be going to the 28 Years Later premiere. Naturally, he looked far, far better than me because he's got an ounce of fashion sense, more than an ounce, actually. We turn up at 6 o'clock, and I always have this anxiety to turn up at premieres early because I want to get a good seat, because sometimes they're actually unallocated. It turns out this one ended up being allocated. But also another good reason to turn up is because they often don't actually like you lingering on the carpet. And it ends up feeling just a little bit too rushed. You know, you get invited on the pretense of, come get some pictures, red carpet footage, and you can promote that on your channels and stuff. But oftentimes, actually, when you get on the carpet, they'll be like, come on, move along, move along, move along. It's like you're on a cramped tube platform. That's what it feels like. So I've gotten into arriving when the doors open, because then you can kind of linger for a bit because the red carpet's not busy at that point. It was a great call. It was basically me and James walking down a ghostly, empty red carpet. And we took a few pictures of each other, which we've both put on our socials. James is taller than me, and so gives me kind of small man syndrome, which is fantastic. Also, he looks better than me, so that's fantastic. It also meant that as we were walking down, we got to really know that none of the people in the fan, in the fan pit, were knew who we were or were going to cheer for us whatsoever. Not that I would have expected that, but when you're on a busy red carpet, you're like, okay, my ego can rest with the fact that these people aren't even looking at me. Never mind look at me enough to know that they don't know me, right? But when you just walk down on your own, you're the first person to enter the carpet, you're like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, it's not Danny Boyle. You might have to wait another hour for Danny Boyle. So we walked down, and I actually had a really strange experience, which I'll share with you, just, again, not for the sake of arrogance, just for the sake of sharing my life with you all. You might be interested. I got asked for my signature for the first time. So, like I say, there was a row of people waiting for the Aaron Taylor-Johnsons and Danny Boyles of this world. And naturally and understandably, none of them knew who the fuck I was. And then down at the bottom, I was lingering for a bit, 3-4 minutes. And then someone kind of mildly screamed in my direction. Just one person. No, sorry, 2 people who were together. And I turned around, and she said, are you the guy who does the Darling sketches with his wife? And what I've noticed now, like coming into this kind of era of the Darling, which is an era that I'm absolutely loving, and go check it out on my profile if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, is that I'm noticing that people are taken aback that I don't have the accent that my Darling character has, which is kind of, he talks like this, darling. He goes, oh, darling, what are we doing here? What's on the list, darling? What are we buying? Bananas? Oh, for crikey, Charlie, what are we... Darling, where are you going? Like this kind of thing, right? And because I'm me, I knew it was an accent. I knew it was a character. I've never considered the fact that other people might not. And so I knew in answering these girls, because I've had a couple of experiences with on the tube now and stuff, that they were going to be taken aback by the fact that I wasn't. I could just get a sense that they kind of maybe had watched a few videos. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe, I guessed correctly, but I guess it was a guess that, like, okay, they probably don't know me beyond any of these videos. And so I kind of answered in my Darling character. I went, hello, darling, like that. And can I just say, by the way, for argument's sake, this guy is a character, but this guy is within me, okay? And I really want to stress that, because that is why we're loving doing the videos so much. And I truly believe that is why the videos are being received well, is because they are genuinely authentic to us. Like, this is an experience, despite the voice difference, I'm purely like inhabiting something that is within me that my Darling has known and experienced for the years we've been together. And I've only just found the way to, I guess, articulate it to an audience. And there's something about that voice and like the face and the which is a bit like, it communicates the overstimulation of like a shopping trip or holiday or whatever without having to say it. and it communicates the kind of hysteria and the panic and like, oh, but also I'll help you with anything, darling. I'll help. Oh yeah, it's fine. I'll do whatever. Anyway, I'm going on tangents, but these two girls, and I said, hello, darling. And I went over and they said, can you sign this? And I was like, I've never done this before. What do you want me to do? They said, I'll just sign the page, put your name. I was like, do you want me to put your name? They said, and they said, no, put your name. And I'm pretty sure that's because they couldn't remember what my name was. And so they would be like, oh, I can go match the signature up to a profile and be like, oh yeah, that was the guy that we saw, right? So that was interesting. I just wrote that down to share as like a point in my life. I've never got asked for that before. And also, as we were lingering, me and James, we managed to have a quick chat with Edith Bowman. So Edith Bowman, as I know all of you listening will know, is usually the presenter of things like this. She's really built this really prolific and esteemed career as like the go-to presenter, interviewer, host of like premieres, any kind of movie launch or press event to do with films, and to the point where she was hired by the BFI to do the interview of Tom Cruise at the BFI a couple of weeks ago before the Final Reckoning premiere, like when Tom Cruise was doing his press run in London. So like that's enough evidence to say that like she's the go-to when it comes to that kind of job in the UK. And I'm just like, to be honest, I'm a little bit starstruck by her because I just really respect what she does, and I think she's very good at what she does. Like, I haven't been to that many premieres, but I've been to enough now to know that she's extremely good at her job. And she's, I mean, obviously she is, because she keeps getting, she's risen to the very, very top of that kind of line of work. And so I did feel a bit starstruck talking to her, and I just was like, oh, great interview with Tom Cruise. Like, this was, we talked for about 20 seconds. I was like, great interview with Tom Cruise. How did you feel? Did you have to manage any nerves kind of talking with Tom Cruise? And she was going, yeah. She started talking about it, got a really nice Scottish accent. And then suddenly got swept away by PR being like, Danny Boyle's coming down the carpet. You got to get ready to host. So she had to get back on stage. This was outside on the carpet area. But that was that. It was literally just 25, 30 seconds. Nice moment with Edith Bowman. And that was that. And so we went inside. It was the Odeon Lux Leicester Square. And we sat down for 28 years later, which, and after an introduction from the cast and crew, or I should say the kind of director and writer and stuff, Alex Garland. I sat down for what has absolutely been the most anticipated film of the year for me since day one. And I know that because I actually talked about it with my mate on WhatsApp in the first week of the new year. We were like, let's talk about what films we were looking forward to. 28 Years was at the top. We looked back at that list in about May, and 28 Years was still at the top. So this has been the one for me this year. And I was pretty hyped for it. As you know, if you've listened to previous episodes, I'm a massive fan of Danny Boyle, the 28 franchise. I'm excited about Aaron Taylor-Johnson and the potential Bond connections. Alex Garland, Warfare, Civil War. Like, I think his recent work is great. And so there was everything culminating in being a really, really just exciting trip to the bloody movies, And then the film started. And so I think because this film has been out since, as you're listening to this, since last Wednesday, I think I'm going to be pretty spoilery about this, because I would say most people listening to this will have had a chance to see it if they care to see it. If you do care to see it and you haven't seen it, I would suggest stopping listening to this episode now, because I'm not actually going to talk about anything after the 28 Years debacle review and all this. So I'll see you back here when you've seen it, basically. And for everyone who has seen it or doesn't care, my review is coming up. So my overall, you know what? Sip of the juice before we start, everyone. My overarching takeaway, and I'm gonna imagine I'm talking to someone who's seen this. My overarching takeaway is I was pleasantly surprised by the tone and the aesthetic. So going into this, we knew that it was going to be filmed on iPhone, which was like an extension of the DV aesthetic that was in 28 Days, which 28 Weeks sort of tried to carry on. And it did have a grisly aesthetic, and there were some really innovative visual choices made, certain like shots of zombies in night vision and things like that. By the way, if you want to know the synopsis or whatever, just fucking Google it. As I always say, like, you know, if you're here, you can Google it. Right? I don't need to waste your time explaining the story. Some visual choices like infrared camera, kind of like it was like almost like a bullet time iPhone effect done by, which I've seen now is done by mounting like 25 iPhones on a rig in a big disc around the subject, and it allowed them to get this bullet time effect of like bow and arrow going through a zombie's head and stuff. And so that was all there, but I was surprised by the tone in that it was certainly more sweet than I expected. And I guess specifically what I mean by that is it was a father-son relationship, but more focused on the son. So it's actually a coming-of-age film. You know, the first one is just like, boom, you're thrown in at the deep end of this pandemic, survive. Now with the virtue of it being 28 years later, they live off the mainland, but the prospect of zombies is actually quite a normal thing. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, the dad, is relatively calm about the prospect of seeing zombies. And so it actually was initially quite like a twee setup for a coming-of-age film that just happened to have ridiculously gory zombie kills in it. And as that goes on, I'd say that carries on, and there's almost, in some ways, at points, there's almost like a extremely gory and graphic fairy tale vibe to 28 Years in the way they shoot things. So again, if you haven't seen it, you won't understand what I mean, but there's a certain scene where the father and son run across a causeway, which is like a slightly submerged path that cuts off the mainland to the island that they're on and allows them to be safe from the zombies. And they're running across the causeway, and as they're splashing through the causeway, Danny Boyle has added this kind of like glistening effect on the steps in the water in order for you to be able to track them running through the water on a wide angle with the kind of sun going down behind them. It's twilight, or coming up behind them. Sorry, I've forgotten which. And there's kind of like quite uplifting, very Danny Boyle kind of trope of like quite uplifting contemporary music put over the top of that, and many other scenes. And like I say, this is interspersed with quite like atrociously, disgracefully gory gore. And I thought that was sweet, and actually kind of a tonal extension of 28 Days Later, where you did have quite twee moments, right? Like, do you remember when they're bouncing through the kind of bodies in the tunnel while they're driving the taxi, for example, and there's quite a twee song playing there. I do think that kind of, that fits the world. It's just not an extension of, it's not a part of the world that I expected to be iterated on. Because all the promo and the press for this was like Aaron Taylor-Johnson walking around with a bow and arrow, very kind of rustic, grimy aesthetic, and I was like, oh, okay, like Aaron Taylor-Johnson's going to be the main character, and it's going to be a very grisly post Last of Us, let's kill some fucking zombies vibes. But it actually, like I say, it was a coming of age movie, and just pulled the rug out from under me in that way. And this, I want to just quickly speak on like some reaction that I've seen since I don't read reviews or whatever before I go see a film. So since I've seen the film and like formed my own opinion, I've seen some reaction that suggests this is quite a polarising film. You know, people being, like I say, very surprised by the tonal differences to what they expected in a negative sense. For me, it was in a positive sense because I do trust Danny Boyle. But this comes on to what I actually wanted to say about it, which was, I wonder if the polarizing aspect of this film isn't exclusively, but is partly divided partly distinguished by whether you're a UK or a US viewer. Forgetting into other international viewership for now, UK or US viewer. And what I mean by that is I think that a UK viewership has a slightly more informed understanding of what Danny Boyle brings to any project than the US does. And I think the US may have been going into this more with a 28 franchise hat on, which is understandable. I mean, it's a fucking 28 movie. Rather than an understanding that Danny Boyle can be a bit off the wall sometimes. You know, he can bring twee moments into the darkest of movies, Trainspotting, 127 Hours and all this. And the way he puts contemporary music on movies actually isn't at play so much in 28 Days as a reference point, but is something that is a reference point for Danny Boyle as a whole. And so I think UK audiences, although his films are massively internationally successful, I think by the virtue of Danny Boyle being British and being in the British cultural psyche since Trainspotting, through the London Olympics, through to now, and being indelible on British culture through the opening of 28 Days and the running down the street in Trainspotting and all this, I think British audiences have a better understanding of Danny Boyle's, I guess, beautifully erratic approach to projects, because he can be, I mean, Slumdog Millionaire, like he can... and what I mean by that is Slumdog Millionaire and the choices it makes in that film with contemporary music and visual aesthetic. He can be really off the wall, and I think one thing that I respect Danny Boyle a lot for is that he's constantly pushing his own creativity. I don't think you can look at him and think that his visual style has stalled. You can definitely draw a line from it, you know, from Trainspotting through the beach, 28 Days and 127 Hours and Trance to here. There's 100% a very clear line, but I think it's developing, always developing. And so I think once I started to get the sense of this tonal difference to what I was expecting, I clicked into that appreciation for Danny Boyle, and I clicked into not being a detriment to the film, because I want Danny Boyle to put whatever his creative instinct is at that moment in time into whatever film he's working on. And so this film does feel like it is, in some senses, not even part of the same trilogy as 28 Days, or to a certain extent 28 Weeks. And I think that's a success, actually, because I think 28 Days was a moment in time culturally for Britain that is very difficult to repeat, especially with how closely it's tied to the DV aesthetic. And also, I think it's a success because this film is supposed to be the start of a trilogy. And so it's actually really nice that it's defined its own tone. And just to go into that a little bit deeper then, that by the tone as well. So we got the tweeness, the coming of age, the sweetness, but also we have the comedy, really. Like there is definite aspects of comedy, black comedy. So again, for those who've seen it, this ends with Jack O'Connor. Is that his name, Jack O'Connor? So sorry if I got that wrong, but Jack O'Connor, really good actor who was the villain in Sinners. If I've got that name wrong, you can picture him now. Being like a Jimmy Savile, not to reference such an awful man, but a Jimmy Savile dressed group of like zombie bandits, essentially. He's heading them up with a gold chain and a tracksuit on and rings and everything. And it's blackly comic, the way that they start like flipping around like Power Rangers and stuff, and it's completely tonally out of the blue. And there's also some darkly funny moments with the Ray Fiennes character in the kind of final third of the movie, just how bleak his existence is, and also how he communicates so flippantly in that beautiful Ray Fiennes way of like somehow putting you off balance in quite dark scenarios, but not in a way that undermines the film. So not as dark, obviously, but like his Voldemort character is able to be very funny and yet still threatening, just because of the way he's delivering these lines in quite like a flippant manner. And we get that again here. So that's just to say, the comedy's permeating through this as well. And so I spoke with my friend a lot about this. Tonally, it was quite surprising, but like I say, with the context of the knowledge of Danny Boyle, I see that as a success. But I do think that depending on your mileage with Danny Boyle and what he brings to a project, you might have less mileage with those tonal differences. You might have just gone in there wanting the pure zombie side. Coming on to the zombie side, quick sip of my juice. Coming on to the zombie side, I think that's extremely strong. So I think if you are just going in for the kills and the blood and the gore and the horror, I think you absolutely get what you want and more. There is some of the grimiest, gruesomest, most fucked up shit I've ever seen on a cinema screen in this film. These like fat crawling zombies eating worms on the forest floor, or there's these like there's a zombie that gives birth and then seems to try and eat her own baby. It's like it's what's the terms to use here? It's like wonderfully sickening. It's like brilliantly horrendous, the gore in this film and the action and the brutality in this film. And Danny Boyle, like I said during the Fofskers a couple of weeks ago about the 127 hours arm cutting scene, Danny Boyle is able to, better than anyone, make the most gruesomest of shit still seem a little bit novelty. Do you know what I mean? He's so good at that. And it's something to do with like his arcadey style. Like it does, some of the parts of this film do come across video gamey in the best way. And it's the music that he uses and the fun that he brings to it, the kineticism of his camera work. It does bring like a novelty to the most goriest of scenarios, most awful of scenarios. And yet he always seems to retain, like I say, that kind of heart, warmth, and like twee nature. That is why Danny Boyle is so perfect for, I guess, adult horror, adult drama. Like he's just very good at that balancing act. What else am I to say about this? Another thing about Danny Boyle, I guess, as a segue, is that his direction of actors always tends to seem to produce quite like almost school play-ish performances from his actors. And I say that for everyone here, apart from Ralph Fiennes, pretty much. Because Ralph Fiennes is on another level in every film he's in. But again, there's something quite like endearing about the performances in Danny Boyle movies. The line deliveries, I've seen people criticizing the dialogue, but I actually think it's the line deliveries are sometimes like, well, it's how you'd expect to them to be delivered in a school play. It's like, oh, Dad, it's like it's always kind of a bit like it feels a bit forced, and it's a trend in Danny Boyle movies that I've noticed. But he somehow gets away with it, and I think again he gets away with it because of the fun and the novelty of his movies, and he gets away with it again here. I've seen some comments about whether it's scary enough. I wouldn't say I was scared throughout, really, not in the same sense that maybe I was at points in 28 Days. But I do think it's shocking enough. I do think it's gruesome enough, horrifying enough. And I do think it pushes the boundaries of a zombie movie in those ways more than enough, if not being like from a suspense point of view necessarily scary. I love the way that Alex Garland has developed the world. Like I say, with the crawler zombies, they've introduced alpha zombies who are like super muscly, slightly more intelligent zombies. They've introduced, a zombie has a baby in this film. I love that they haven't just settled on what 28 Days was, and instead they've developed the world, developed the tone, and developed the aesthetic, and set it up for a potential further 2 movies, which is what the plan is. So I had a fucking great time. I know I've been talking around this now a little bit, haven't I? Like I've been beating around the bush, but like, let me just put that out there. I had a fucking great time, and I'd say generally when things are polarizing or when reviews are up and down, I tend to be more on the down. Actually, I'd say my character is to be maybe more on the negative when the discussion is up in the air. In this case, I am absolutely on the positive. I think I do not want to be dragged. Do not drag me into trying to rank the 28 franchise because, look, 28 weeks is third. Let's just get that out of the way. But between 28 days and 28 years, I need another viewing of 28 years to understand more how it sits alongside 28 days in the same world. And therefore rank them against each other. But just to say that even the fact that I'm saying that is absolutely brilliant testament to what 28 years is. I think it absolutely does have a chance to become, in at least for me, my favourite in the trilogy, and who knows what happens in the next two. And also it's testament to the movie that, like, I'm really willing to see this film again. I'm so buzzing to see this film again. I even tried to find if I could see it again this same weekend, but I just don't have time. That can only be a good thing. And also, you know, last week I was talking about how films are super long nowadays. Why is it that over 2 hours 30 appears the norm for like mainstream movies? I was going to say big budget, but I guess you just call this mainstream. And this isn't. This is 1 hour 55. Perfecto. Like, more of that, please. Like, and just like I said last week, shorter movies make it rewatchable, not only in its lifespan but also in its cinema run. You will undoubtedly earn more box office on a good movie if it's under 2 hours than it is 2 hours 30, because people are more willing to go see it again. That's unless it's something like Titanic, which is a fucking cultural phenomenon. So, an Endgame. So I do feel completely willing to go see this again. I'm really excited. My only concern with the box office is, it's like I say, it's boiling in London right now. It is boiling, and it was boiling on the premiere, and then the film came out the next day, and it's boiling since then, and it's now the hottest day of the year, and it's going to continue to be boiling this next week. Like, was this the right time to release this film? Is this a summer blockbuster? I don't know if that's... this film screams spring, autumn to me. And I don't know if that release schedule has been done very well, to be honest. And I can see why they did it, because the trailer slapped. Everyone loved the trailer. It got millions and millions of views. The hype was big. The hype was real, and rightly so. But there's always this risk in summer of like falling during, let's be honest, just like hot weather. And domestic box office, i.e. UK box office, is really important to the success of this film and whether the following two films are going to be commissioned, because Danny Boyle says that's still in the balance. So, you know, in the next couple of weeks we've got F1 and Jurassic Rebirth. You know, they're summer blockbusters. I don't know if 28 Years might have benefited financially from a release in spring or autumn. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, I'm not massively keen on his performance in this film, and it makes me worried about what he might bring to a James Bond franchise. There's huge murmurings that he will be the next James Bond. Sorry, sipping my juice. And I don't think his performance in this film is all that, and I actually think it's quite a good marker for what he might be able to bring to a Bond, because he's a figure of strength in this film. He is a skilled, I was going to say a warrior. What would you say? Like combatsman? And also he's a little bit of a dickhead, right? I know that's quite vague, but those three things are all characteristics of Bond. I don't think Aaron Taylor-Johnson actually brought the charisma to this role. And look, maybe he didn't try to bring charisma to the role. Maybe that was his characterization, but just a pin in that one. I'm just a bit concerned about ATJ. So, to round off the 28 Years review, I had a fucking great time. I am going to try and see it again. And I do think it's gruesome and fucking brutal in the best way, and Ralph Fiennes brings Act 3 home with pathos and gravitas, and it really, really lands the plane. And I really think it was fantastic. And I'm still like processing the experience, and that's a good thing. Processing the tonal differences and blah blah blah. And I'm excited to see it again to continue that process. And so I guess I haven't rated this on Letterboxd yet, so don't tie me to this. But I think I'm going to go on after this recording and give it a good 4 out of 5. And I think on a rewatch it might be a 4.5 out of 5. But I think I'm gonna give it a 4 for now. So I loved it. So thanks for joining me for the. I feel like there's a lot of stuff in my head that I would love to talk about more. Speaking of Bond, by the way, Alex Garland would be a great... Everyone's talking about Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, probably unattainable directors for Bond. Alex Garland has the writing chops and also the directing chops to handle a franchise like Bond, I think. I think he's shown that. More so than Danny Boyle, because obviously Danny Boyle was on the No Time to Die production, got fired. I actually think Alex Garland might be the one to go for. And I think he could do some real cool stuff with it. So thanks for listening. Still processing this. Next week I've got the F1 premiere on Monday, so next week we're going to have that. And we're going to have a Scarlett Johansson Fofskers next week, which is going to be about the Jurassic Rebirth coming out the following week after that, where we'll have the review as well of Rebirth in that following week. And then we're going on to Superman. You know, we've got Superman the week after that. It's just boom, 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 boom. 4 weeks in a row. We just got 4 massive movies. So, again, thanks for joining me at Fred Asquith on Film on Instagram and TikTok. YouTube at Fred Asquith YT. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Please go consume this however you like, but not only however you like, but everywhere else as well. Okay. Thank you very much. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.